They say snow don't have no memory, but I swear to God, this storm felt personal. I hadn't seen wind like that in 20 winters, not up near Elk Tooth Ridge, not since the war. The kind of wind that didn't just bite, it accused the kind that stripped bark off trees and prayers off men's tongues. I don't rightly remember how long I'd been riding. 2 days, maybe 3, since I'd left Mason's Hollow with a pack mule, a stubborn gelding named Brisket, and supplies meant to last me till New Year's. I was headed to my hunting cabin west of Trailbone Creek, tucked up quiet in a canyon where even the sheriff wouldn't follow you. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And then came the storm. Not drifting snow, but the kind that slammed into you sideways. White-out wind, howling like the land was grieving something. It wasn't just bad luck. No, it felt like I'd trespassed, somewhere holy and unwelcome. I couldn't see past Brisket's ears. The road disappeared, so did the trees. I'd crossed that same stretch of land 100 times before, and now, I couldn't even find the split rock that marked the canyon's mouth. The land turned foreign, and colder. So much colder I pulled my coat tighter. My left hand had gone numb hours ago. The frost on my beard crunched when I breathed. My horse's flanks were steaming like a blacksmith's forge, and I could feel Brisket starting to shiver under me. He knew what I knew. We wouldn't last much longer out here, but I didn't turn back. Why? I guess I was too stubborn, or maybe just too ashamed. A man starts aging quicker when he's got no one left to pray for him. That's when I started thinking about the dog. It had been 6 winters back. I'd found him half dead by a frozen creek, ribs like knuckles, one paw mangled in a trap, number, collar, just scars. Most men would have left him, but I didn't. I didn't, because, well, maybe because I'd been left once too. And I remember thinking, this thing wants to live. You could see it in his eyes. He didn't whine, didn't beg. He just stared like he was daring the world to take him out. I carried him home in my coat. Took me 2 months to fix him up. Called him Ghost, on account of his grey eyes and the way he'd vanish whenever company came around. He stayed with me 3 good years. Quiet, loyal, and smart enough to never touch my jerky stash unless I said so. Then one day, he disappeared. Same way he came. No goodbye, no trail. Just gone. I buried that hurt deep. Too deep, maybe. But now, in the middle of this cursed storm, my mind kept circling back to Ghost, like something inside me remembered warmth in a place I'd forgotten existed. A sound jolted me out of memory, sharp and strange. Not wind, not the creak of ice. It was a bark, high, distant, barely there, but I heard it. I stopped Brisket cold. My heart thudded. I strained to listen, pulling my hat back, ears stinging in the cold. Nothing. Then, again, closer this time, a bark. Ghost, I whispered, like a fool. That you, boy? I didn't get a reply, just wind, and a flicker of movement in the white, a dark shadow darting between the drifts. I spurred Brisket forward. Maybe it was madness, maybe it was memory, or maybe, just maybe, it was a dog I'd once saved, coming back to return the favor. If this story's pulling at something deep inside you, maybe a memory, or a dog you once loved, let me know in the comments. And if you're curious where this storm leads, hit that subscribe button. I kicked Brisket gently, urging him forward. The snow had turned slick and uneven, crunching under his hooves like broken glass under a blanket. He was nervous. I could feel it in the way his muscles bunched and twitched beneath the saddle. I didn't blame him. I was nervous too. There's a certain kind of quiet out there that don't feel natural, like the land itself is holding its breath. Then I saw it, a set of prints in the snow. Not hoof marks, no, these were paws, 4 of them, spaced wide, sharp claws digging in. They led off the trail and vanished toward a grove of pines. I dismounted. My knees buckled for a second, stiff from the cold. I tied Brisket to a stub of juniper, poking out from a snowbank, and followed the tracks on foot. My rifle slung but ready. Every step brought a deeper kind of stillness, like the wind itself had curled up and gone to sleep. And then I saw him, just a shape at first, low to the ground, half shadow, half snow. His coat was still that same mottled grey, like granite, touched by moonlight. He stood silent among the trees, watching me. Those eyes, God help me, I remembered those eyes, pale and steady, not afraid, not angry, just waiting. Ghost, I said again, softer this time. My breath came out like smoke. He didn't bark, didn't run, just turned and started walking, slow but sure, like he expected me to follow. So I did. I stumbled after him, knees deep in snow, branches slapping at my face. I didn't know where he was leading me. Hell, I didn't even care. Something in me trusted him more than I trusted my own map, my own memory. We moved for what felt like hours. My limbs burned from the cold, and I stopped feeling my fingers. Altogether, I fell once, knees buckled right out from under me. I thought I'd black out there, belly down in the snow, ready to give up, but Ghosts came back. He circled me, let out a low whine, and pressed his nose against my face, warm breath on my cheek, his eyes locked on mine, and for a second, I wasn't in the storm anymore. I was back by the fire. 6 winters ago, I was patching up his paw with trembling hands, whispering stupid stories to keep myself from crying. I remembered how he'd rested his head on my lap, a wild thing made tame by kindness, and I remembered thinking, maybe we're both broken enough to belong. That memory gave me just enough strength to get back up. Ghost trotted ahead again, tail low, ears alert. I followed. I didn't ask where we were going. I knew he wouldn't lead me wrong. The snow started to change. Thinner now, less wind. I saw pine needles poking through drifts and a patch of stone I recognized. I knew this place. This was the ridge just above my cabin, the one with the broken wagon wheel propped against a pine, marking where I buried my old trapper partner, Lenny, 8 years ago. Nobody came up this way anymore. I didn't even mark it on my maps. Ghost stopped by the wheel. He looked back once, then sat, nose lifted into the wind like he was listening to something only dogs can hear. I stood there, breathing hard, tears freezing on my cheeks. Not from grief, from something else. From relief. Because in that moment, I understood. Ghost hadn't been lost all these years. He'd just been waiting for the right storm to bring me home. I didn't say nothing, not at first. Just stood there with Ghost, at the ridge, letting the cold chew on my bones while my heart warmed with something I couldn't name. He looked older, I realized. Little more grey on his muzzle, a little less muscle on his frame. But those eyes, Lord, those eyes were still firelit glass, and somehow, some damn way, he had found me. Again, he stood and gave a low huff, then turned toward the slope. Below us, I saw it barely visible through the snow-crusted branches. My cabin, smokeless chimney, shutter half hanging off one hinge, and a drift of snow piled knee-high against the door, looked more grave than shelter. I hadn't been there in 2 winters, figured it wouldn't still be standing. I stumbled the rest of the way down, legs aching, Ghost at my side. When I reached the door, I had to lean on it with both shoulders, just to crack it open. The hinges groaned like an old man stretching too far. Inside was shadow and silence. Everything as I left it, the rusted lantern, my old hide bed, a torn saddlebag in the corner, smelled of pine mold, ashes, and memory. Brisket whinnied, faint in the distance. He was still tied up at the ridge. I started to turn back for him, but Ghost gave a bark, sharp, urgent. I paused. The air shifted. Not wind, something smaller, subtle. Then I heard it, a sound I hadn't heard in years, the creak of floorboards upstairs. Someone, or something, was in the loft. I drew my Colt, slow, cocked it light. "Who's there?" I called. Voice cracked, no answer. Ghost stepped in front of me, growling, low ears back. I took a breath, then crept up the narrow ladder to the loft, every step loud in the silence. My boots touched the upper planks just as a board groaned loud to my left. I spun, finger brushing the trigger, but there was no one there, just a pile of furs in the corner, and the faintest impression, like someone been sleeping there recently. I knelt, pressing my glove to the fur, still warm. Whoever it was, they'd left minutes ago, maybe less. A rustle below, then a bark. I scrambled down, heart pounding. Ghost was standing at the front door, stiff as a fence post, nose to the wind. Then he bolted. "Ghost!" I shouted, but he was already gone, snow flying behind him like wings. I didn't stop to think. I grabbed my rifle and coat, whistled once to Brisket, and ran. I followed Ghost through the trees, across the gully behind the cabin, past a downed pine I remembered cutting back in '78. We crossed a frozen creek, and that's when I saw it. Footprints. Human, barely covered by snow, small light, moving fast. Ghost stopped ahead, nose low, tail high, then barked again, urgent, like he was telling me to hurry. I broke into a run. We followed the tracks around the ridge, the same ridge where Ghost had first led me down to the cabin and into a narrow gulch that dipped between two rock walls. The wind died there. The silence returned, and then I saw her, a girl no more than 10, wrapped in torn cloth and a fur coat twice her size. Her hands were red, lips blue. She sat huddled beneath a ledge of rock, eyes closed, breath shallow. I stopped cold. Ghost padded up to her, nose twitching. He sat beside her, protective, as if he'd known her all along. I dropped to my knees. "Hey there," I said softly, barely breath. "You with me?" She didn't answer, but her eyelids fluttered. I pulled off my coat, wrapped it around her shoulders, then scooped her into my arms. She was light as a sack of oats, but I felt the weight of her shiver all the way through my ribs. Ghost followed silent as I carried her back through the snow. Toward the cabin I thought I'd never see again, a cabin I now realized had been waiting not for me, but for her. The snow fell quieter now, like it knew to hush for something holy. I carried the girl across the clearing, boots sinking deep with every step. She barely stirred, just a breath now and then, weak and raspy, like she was trying not to be a burden to the world. Ghost walked beside me the whole way, close enough to touch, never looking away from her. Inside the cabin, I laid her near the hearth. The fire was out, but I still had tinder and flint in my saddlebag. My hands shook too much to work fast, but Ghost pressed his weight against my side, grounding me. It took 3 tries, but I got it lit. Dry pine needles, broken bark, a hunk of fatwood I'd tucked in the rafters years back. The flame caught and spread, casting long shadows up the log walls. The warmth crept in slow. I unwrapped her from my coat and checked her hands, raw and purple, but still warm at the core. That meant hope. Her cheek had a scrape across it, not fresh, but healing. Eyes still closed. She looked like someone who hadn't been spoken to in a long time. I sat down beside her, took off my gloves, and laid a blanket over both of us. Ghost curled at her feet, tail tucked in tight, ears twitching at every gust of wind outside. "You brought her here," I whispered to him, more to myself than to the dog. "But why?" The fire popped. She stirred. I leaned closer. Her lips parted, and she whispered something so faint I had to bend near her mouth to catch it. "Mama." A chill ran down my spine. Not from the storm. There were no cabins for miles, no towns east of Trailbone, but the ghost town at Gully Hill. And that place had been dead since the mines collapsed back in '72. I got up and poured warm water into a tin cup, crushed a bit of dried willow bark in, let it steep, slid it against her lips. She sipped a little, coughed once, then fell back into that silent half-sleep. I didn't sleep that night. Sat there by the fire, watching the girl breathe, watching Ghost, who never once took his eyes off her. Around midnight, he stood up, padded to the door, and scratched once. I opened it. He slipped outside. A minute later, I heard a low whine, then another brisket came into view, still tethered near the ridge, stomping impatiently. I'd left him too long. Poor boy was half iced over. I led him to the cabin and blanketed him near the corner where the draft was weakest. Then Ghost vanished again. When morning came, the storm had broken. Sky was white, but clear. I stepped outside to fetch snow for boiling, and that's when I saw it. Callen footprints. Not the girl's. A man's. Heavy, deep, circling the cabin, then walking away into the trees. I followed them 50 paces, rifle in hand, until they'd disappeared over a rise. Whoever he was, he'd been here, watching us, watching her. I turned back quick. When I stepped inside, her eyes were open, wide and scared, locked straight onto mine. I knelt beside her. "You're safe," I said. "Name's Eli. You remember yours?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Just once." "Ruth," she whispered. That name hit me like a hammer to the gut, not because I knew her, but because I knew the grave behind my cabin, the one marked Ruth McKenna, beloved wife and mother, 1836 to 1864, the grave I never dug, the grave that appeared one spring, long after I built the place. No town records, no stonecutter ever claimed it. Just there. I stared at the girl, and she stared back, and for the first time in a long, long while, I felt the past lean forward, like it had something to tell me. I didn't sleep, not a wink. After Ruth spoke, her name, something in the air shifted, like the weight of winter had moved off my shoulders and settled in my chest instead. She fell back into sleep soon after. But me, I just sat there, watching the firelight flicker over her face and trying not to shake. Because I'd seen that name before. I'd knelt in front of it. I'd left wildflowers on that grave more than once without knowing why. Ruth McKenna. No one in town ever claimed the name. No travelers passed through Trailbone asking for her. The grave just appeared one spring, like the mountain had coughed her up and marked her down. I remember staring at the dates carved in rough stone, 1836 to 1864, and thinking she'd died too young. And now, here she was, or someone with her name, same age Ruth would have been when she died, if she hadn't. But the girl on my floor wasn't born in 1836. She wasn't a ghost, or a spirit, or anything the preachers warn you about. She was real cold hands, ragged breathing, and a bruise on her temple, and Ghost had brought her here for a reason. He always had a reason. By sunup, the wind had died for good. I left Brisket tethered by the woodpile and stepped out to check the ridge trail. The snow had packed down enough to walk, though it'd still swallow your boot tops if you weren't careful. I walked up to the grave again, but it was gone. Just gone. No stone, no mound, not even a bare patch in the snow where it should have been. I stared so long my eyes burned. I knew exactly where it was supposed to be. 6 steps past the broken wagon wheel, beneath the tall pine that leaned like a drunk against the wind. I'd stood here too many times to be wrong. I dropped to my knees, scraped the snow with my gloves. Nothing, not even roots disturbed. That grave had vanished, like it'd never been there at all. That's when I heard her voice again, behind me. "You're him." I turned slow. Ruth was standing barefoot in the snow, Eli's coat draped around her thin shoulders. She wasn't shivering, wasn't crying. She just stared like she knew something I didn't. "Knew who?" I asked, gently, standing. She pointed to the grave that wasn't there. "You put flowers there." My jaw tensed. "How do you know that?" She didn't answer, just walked back to the cabin like she'd seen enough. Ghost met her halfway, tail still, ears up. He brushed against her leg like he belonged there. Back inside, I fixed a bit of dried venison and hardtack softened in broth. Ruth ate slow, polite, like she wasn't sure it was all right to take food from someone. I poured her water, then asked the question that had been hammering inside my head since I saw her. "Where'd you come from?" She didn't look at me when she spoke. "There was a wagon. Before the snow, it broke. Mama said to wait. She never came back." Where she pointed toward, the southeast, by the burnt trees. I knew the place. Old mining road gone dead, after a fire swept through in 77. No one used it now but coyotes and ghosts. "How long ago?" She shrugged. 3 sleeps. 3 nights in that cold alone. No coat, no fire. She wouldn't have survived, not without something. Or someone. Ghost had brought her here, sure. But maybe he'd done more than just lead her. Maybe he'd watched her, protected her, like he used to do for me. She looked up at me then, right in the eyes. "You're Eli," she said. I nodded. "That's right. I had a letter for you," she whispered. "But I lost it." My breath caught. "A letter? From who?" She looked back toward the window, toward the woods. Then she said it. "My mother." And I swear to God, the fire cracked just right, and in the shadows by the wall, I thought I saw her, not Ruth, but a woman, tall and still, with soft eyes and a hand over her heart. Then she was gone. We're halfway through the trail now, and the snow's not the only thing melting. If this story's got your heart caught in your throat, let me know in the comments. Who do you think Ruth's mother really was? And what happened out by those burnt trees? Tap that like or subscribe if you're riding with us through the storm. The next morning, I saddled Brisket before the frost lifted. Ruth was still asleep, curled beside the fire with Ghost watching over her like a sentry. I stood over them for a long moment, the kind of quiet where the only sound is the creak of old wood and the ache in your bones. Then I pulled the blanket higher on her shoulders, stepped outside, and let the cold slap me full across the face. I needed it. I wasn't going to outrun the past, but I figured I could ride into it head-on. She said there'd been a wagon, a letter, a fire road southeast, where her mama told her to wait. I knew the trail, or what was left of it. It used to lead toward Silverpine Pass before the fires 20 years ago cut it off. I remembered riding that way once in my youth, before the trees turned to black bones and the wind started sounding like voices you didn't want to hear. I left Ghost with Ruth, told him to stay, and he did, which he never used to. Not unless Something mattered more than me. I rode out slow. The trail was packed just enough from the wind that Brisket could make decent time, though the footing was still dicey in places. I passed old stumps and trees twisted from heat long gone. The air felt hollow here, like it had been emptied out. 2 hours in, I found the first sign. Half a wagon wheel, blackened and cracked, stuck upright in the snow like a gravestone. Near it, a length of iron axle, and something else. The torn remains of a baby blue ribbon, tangled on a branch. I dismounted and knelt beside it. The ground around was trampled with faded tracks, old, scattered, but real. More than one person had been here, and not long ago. Then I saw the blood, just a smear, frozen and dark, halfway down a rock near the wheel. Could have been days old, maybe a week at most. A trail led from it, faint but clear, dragged, not walked. Whatever happened here, someone got hurt. I followed it. Took me another half hour through trees black as ash, until I reached a spot where the snow dipped low and the wind went quiet, and there it was, a shallow grave. Someone had tried to hide it, branches piled awkward, not enough to fool the animals. A bit of cloth stuck out beneath the snow, blue, same as the ribbon. I knelt, brushing snow aside gently, slow as prayer. She was young, maybe 30, face turned toward the sky like she was waiting for something that never came. Her hands were folded over her chest, and her mouth still held a faint trace of a smile. I sat back on my heels, hat to my chest. "Your mama," I whispered. Whoever she'd been, she'd walked this far through snow and fire just to leave her daughter somewhere, safe. Somewhere Ghost could find her, somewhere I could. That's when I saw the paper, tucked beneath the woman's hand. A letter, frozen stiff, corners curled, ink blurred, but still legible. I pulled it free, careful not to tear it, and stood. I didn't read it right away. I looked back at the trail, at the way the trees leaned, at how the mountain sky had gone suddenly pale. Then I mounted Brisket, took one last look at the woman who'd led her daughter through fire, and headed back the way I came. By the time I reached the cabin, dusk was falling. The first thing I saw was Ghost sitting at the door, ears perked, waiting like he'd known the exact moment I'd return. He stood when he saw the letter in my hand. Inside, Ruth was awake, sitting by the fire, her eyes big and dark. I knelt beside her. "I found her," I said. She didn't ask for proof. She just nodded once, and then she cried. Not loud, not messy, just quiet tears, like she'd been holding Em back her whole life. I sat with her till the fire burned low. Later, when she slept, I stepped outside again, opened the letter, and started reading. The envelope was soft with age. The edges curled like dry leaves. No name on the outside, just dirt, blood, and time. I turned it in my hands a moment before I unfolded it. My fingers shook, but not from the cold. The first line stopped me dead. "If this finds its way to Eli Banner." I dropped to a seat on the porch rail, lantern swinging from a hook above me. Ghost settled at my feet, quiet and still. Eli Banner. That was me, still was. But hearing it on paper like that, it felt like some long-forgotten version of myself had just sat down beside me. The letter was written in a woman's hand, neat but weathered, like it had been penned by someone who'd held a rifle as often as a quill. The words were smeared in spots but readable. Then that means I didn't make it. And if I didn't, Ruth is alone now. But she's not just anybody's child. She's yours. My vision blurred. I blinked hard. Her name's Ruth, after my mother. She was born in the spring after you left Silverpine. I never knew how to find you again. Lord knows I tried. But when I saw your name scratched into the beam at the Trailbone Supply post 3 winters ago, I knew where to send her if things ever went wrong. I read that line again and again, then lowered the letter and just sat. I remembered Silverpine. Of course I did. A mining town half swallowed by rock and greed. I'd ridden through for supplies, stayed for 3 weeks, waiting for a new bridle from a smith, too drunk to forge straight. I remembered the saloon with the green lamp, the room upstairs, the girl named Marion who laughed too loud and drank her whiskey straight. She'd braided her hair with wild sage. Marion, she never told me she was carrying my child. I didn't write sooner because I didn't want to make trouble for you. You were never cruel. You were kind. You saved a dog no one else would touch. I figured that meant you'd save her too, someday. When the time came, I held the letter tighter. Ghost lifted his head. We both sat there, staring out at the trees while the wind whispered around the eaves. Ruth is yours. The words didn't sink in easy. They pressed down slow, like snow on a roof. Quiet but heavy. And then the ache came. Not the kind that wounds, the kind that opens. Like a lock turned after years of rust. I stood and stepped inside. She was still sleeping, curled on her side. Her hand was under her cheek. I saw now, plain as day, that she had Marian's chin, her shape, her quiet, watchful eyes. I'd seen orphans in my time, known the hollow way they stare, but Ruth didn't look hollow. She looked like someone who'd been loved, even if just long enough, and someone had trusted me to carry that love the rest of the way. I sat beside her, letter still in hand, and said it out loud for the first time. I'm your father. I thought maybe saying it would break something in me. Instead, it built something. She stirred, didn't wake, but she reached for my hand in her sleep and held it. The morning after I read the letter, something inside me had changed. It wasn't loud. It didn't crack like lightning or roar like thunder. It was quieter than that, like the sound of a snowflake landing on warm skin. But it was there, and it stayed. Ruth woke slow, her eyes blinking at the beams overhead, as if trying to remember where the dream ended and real life began. I sat by the hearth, boots off, mending an old wool glove I hadn't touched in years. She turned to me, and said, real soft, you stayed. I nodded. Yeah, I did. She sat up, the blanket still around her shoulders, ghosts pressed close to her side. I didn't tell her yet, not about the letter, not about Marian. I didn't want it to come out like news. It wasn't news. It was truth, and truth takes time to root. Same as spring in this land. You don't force it, you let it settle. So instead, I said, you hungry? She nodded. I cooked what I had: beans, some dried squash, a slice of smoked venison from the pack I'd meant to keep for emergencies. This felt like one. We ate slow, without much talk. But when she finished, she said something I didn't expect. You have a kind face, she said, looking down at her tin plate. Mama said that's how I'd know you. I didn't answer right away, just watched the fire crackle and spit, and let the weight of that settle in the space between us. You want to know about her? I asked. Ruth nodded, a little too fast, so I told her. Not everything, just what I remembered. Her laugh, her sharp tongue, how she used to lean in when she was listening to someone real close, like she was catching music only she could hear. I told Ruth her mama wasn't soft, but she was warm, and she didn't take two fools. I told her that if she had a temper, it was the kind that came from loving something too deeply, and I told her Marian loved her more than life. Ruth was quiet a long time after that. Then she reached for my hand and said, my name's Ruth, Marian. I just about lost it right there. Not from grief, but from the weight of knowing this girl had been carrying the memory of her mother in her own name, like a shield across her chest. We sat together after that, long into the afternoon. I showed her how to stitch a patch on torn fabric, how to clean a pan with ash when you're short on water. She listened close, asked good questions. Ghost stayed near, tail flicking now and then, head resting on his paws like he'd finally relaxed. Around sundown, she said something else that near brought me to my knees. Did she tell you about me? I shook my head. No, I didn't know. Not till now. She looked down. Sometimes I wondered if she made you up, like a story to help me sleep, but I kept hoping. I put my hand on her shoulder. Careful, gentle. I ain't a story, Ruth, and I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I'm here now. She nodded. That night, I tucked her in by the hearth. She was asleep before the fire burned low. I stepped outside, snow crunching under my boots, and looked up at the stars breaking through the clouds. Ghosts came to stand beside me. We stood there a long time, just breathing the cold air. Reckon I owe you everything, I muttered. He didn't move, didn't have to. Somewhere behind me, in that quiet little cabin in the pines, a girl named Ruth slept safe, and for the first time in a long, long while. So did I. The next morning, Ghost was gone. At first I thought maybe he was just stretching his legs. He'd always done that. Even years ago when I first found him, limping and half-dead near the river bend, he'd disappear a while, then reappear like smoke, silent and certain. But the sun had climbed high, and his prince hadn't circled back. I saddled up, told Ruth to stay inside. She didn't argue, just stood near the window with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, eyes tracking me like she wasn't sure if I'd come back. The snow was fresh from the night before, soft and unbroken, except for a trail of paw prints heading north, out past the pine line. I followed him. Couple miles out, where the old ridge starts to rise, I found something else. Boot tracks. Big ones. Heavy. Not mine. They ran alongside. Ghosts. Then veered off. Someone been out here last night, and Ghost had gone after him. I drew my rifle. Loaded. Listened. Wind only. But in the pit of my gut, something stirred. A memory, maybe. Or just instinct. The old kind. Older than language. That tells you when a man means harm. I followed the boot prints. They led me up the ridge, past a frozen stream, to an outcrop I hadn't been to in years. From up there, you could see the cabin through the trees. Tiny, fragile dot, and from there, I saw movement, a shape, someone watching. Whoever it was, they weren't moving quick. They stood still, hood pulled low, long coat dusted in snow. I ducked low, glassed them with my spyglass. What I saw turned my blood cold. The man was holding something in his hand, a strip of cloth. Red flannel. Same pattern as the scarf Ruth wore. I was down the ridge in seconds, boots tearing through, snow, heart pounding like a war drum. I didn't yell, didn't call out. Ghost wasn't anywhere I could see, but the tracks told me enough. He'd tried to stop found signs of a scuffle, prints tangled, spots of blood. Not much, but enough. The man had come close to the cabin. Too damn close. I got back just before sundown. Ruth opened the door before I could knock. "Where's Ghost?" she asked. I shook my head. "He's tracking someone." She didn't ask who. Just nodded, face pale, lips thin. I told her to keep the pistol near, showed her how to aim, how to brace. She said she'd handled one before. I believed her. That night, neither of us slept. I sat by the fire, rifle across my lap. Ruth curled under the cot, Ghost's blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her breath came shallow. She tried to be brave, but she flinched at every branch knock, every gust of wind. When the fire burned down to coals, I heard it, a soft bark, faint, but real. I stepped outside. Ghost stood at the edge of the woods, sighed, heaving blood on his haunch, muzzle red, but he was alive. He looked at me, then turned his head, and behind him, deeper in the trees, I saw a shadow move, not fast, not like an ambush, but steady. Deliberate. A second figure. Tall, wrapped in black, holding a lantern. Whoever they were, they weren't alone this time. I raised my rifle. Ghost growled, low and mean, and didn't move from my side. They stopped, just short of the tree line. Then, a voice, rough male, cold as the air around us. "I've come for what's mine." I didn't answer, didn't have to, because I knew, in that moment, this wasn't about me, it was about Ruth. I didn't say a word. Just stood there, rifle raised, breath steaming in the cold air, heart thudding like hooves on dry earth. Ghost was by my leg, growling deep, not barking, just that low, steady sound that said, "Don't come closer." The man stepped forward into the edge of firelight, and I finally saw his face, grizzled, scarred across the jaw, one eye milky white, the kind of face you don't forget, not because it's familiar, but because it looks like it's seen too much and cared too little. He held the lantern high. I saw the glint of a revolver on his belt, but it was the girl behind him that made me lower my rifle just an inch. She couldn't been more than 16, pale, thin, wrapped in a threadbare shawl, eyes sunken from hunger and fear. She clung to his coat like she didn't know where else to stand, and suddenly, things clicked. This man wasn't just hunting, he was running. "Name's Boone," he said, voice like gravel and ash, "and that girl's mine." I didn't answer because I knew better than to trust a man who called a girl his like that. He kept talking, took her in when she was barely walking. She ran off last spring, said she'd rather freeze than live under my roof. Looks like she picked your cabin instead. Ruth stepped out behind me. "I'm not yours," she said, quiet but steady. Boone chuckled, "Ain't what the law says." I felt Ghost shift beside me, muscles tensed like drawn wire. "What law?" I said finally. "Out here, there's just what's right." Boone's hand drifted to his belt. "Then maybe I'll take her back the old way." What happened next is a blur. Boone's hand moved, and I fired. He wasn't fast. Maybe age had slowed him. Maybe he didn't believe I'd actually shoot. But that round took his gun clean out of his hand. Ghost lunged next, teeth bared, but I called him off with one sharp whistle. Boone was on his knees, clutching his wrist, bleeding into the snow. The girl didn't move. She just stared at me, like she was waiting for the next bad thing. I walked over, rifle still raised, boots crunching in the frost. Boone looked up, snarling through his teeth. "You think you're some kind of savior?" "No," I said. "I'm just tired of men like you thinking they can own people." Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I let him go, told him to walk south, drop the weapons, and never come back. He limped away under Ghost's watchful eye, lantern swinging like a fading star in the dark. The girl didn't speak for a long time, just stood there, trembling. I offered her my coat. She took it. Later, by the fire, Ruth brought her a bowl of stew. Ghost curled near her feet, like he'd known her all along. I asked her name. "Clara," she whispered. "You're safe now," Ruth said, "if you want to stay." And just like that, the cabin didn't feel empty anymore. The storm passed the next morning. Sun broke through the clouds, lighting the trees in 1,000 shades of gold. Snow melted in slow drops from the roof. I stood out on the porch, cup of coffee warming my hands, watching Clara brush Ghost's coat in the yard. He looked proud, like he knew he'd brought me home, not just to a place, but to something I thought I'd lost. Family. I think he knew all along. Ruth said behind me. I didn't have to ask who she meant. Yeah, Ghost knew. Knew I couldn't live with ghosts. Forever knew I needed someone to need me back, and maybe, just maybe, I'd finally stopped running to Dot. Thanks for riding through this story with me, partner. If it stirred something in you, a memory, a hope, or just a love for loyal dogs and second chances, consider liking the video, leaving a comment, or subscribing for more tales from the trail. Until next time, keep the fire burning.